Hey everybody, this is Jack from BitReach, and you're listening to Scaling DevTools, the show that investigates how DevTools go from 0 to 1. Today's guest is Natwar Maheshwari. Natwar is a developer marketing lead at Algolia and has a ton of experience in developer marketing, including with MailChimp, working on their APIs, and before that as an automation engineer. So clearly has a lot of experience on both sides. Natvar, it's an absolute pleasure to have you today.
Thanks a lot for having me, Jack. Super happy to be here.
How do you think we should think about developer marketing when we're just getting started?
That's a great question. We have talked about this in the past, but I think at very beginning, you just have to look at what you think is cool and put it out there. I think that's the first thing. A lot of developers build like some amazing things, and they don't think it's like oh, it's okay, it's not that great. No, you might think it's not that great, but for someone in this world, it's like freaking cool, right? I think put things out there. The things that you're working on. Don't think this is not done. Don't think that, others might not like it. That's not the goal. The goal is to be you, at least in the beginning. I mean, the goal should always be to be you. But in the beginning, when you have very limited audience, when you are trying to find your first few customers, just be you and be very careful about what you read from traditional marketing places. I'm not saying they're wrong. I'm saying that might not work for you. There's a lot of skill that comes into picture when someone took their blog from 0 to 1.5 million in 18 months. There's a lot of skill there that's not mentioned in that blog that you read. So be a little bit careful about that. But at the same time, do experiments. I think in the beginning, experiments are the only thing that work meaning that will tell you what will work for you, but a lot of experiments will fail. Coming from the developer side of the world, if you're yourself a developer, you're used to doing something and seeing it work or not work, and then you troubleshoot it. It's not that fast in marketing. What happens is you do something and then you wait, and then you have to just wait. That's why experimentation is important, that you're running multiple experiments at the same time and figuring out what's working for you. So like something that worked for a mid-sized company or a really big company might or might not work for you, but it's a good place to start thinking in terms of experimentation. One more thing that I'll say here, your whole team, if they're doing cool stuff, put it out there. Don't care that, oh, Twitter is not the platform or LinkedIn is not the platform or whatever. It doesn't matter. If you're doing cool stuff, put it out there. If you think GitHub is your place, go ahead, do that. That's fine. If you think you're doing something that can be used in an open source project and you should contribute there, do that, right? Think about your customer base, which is other developers, right? That's why you're building a dev tool. Would they think this is cool, right? I think that's a lot. And document your process. I'm very bad at this. I'm sure, Jack, you have struggled with this in your life. If we tell people how we reach to a place, even if they have issues with our steps, it's still very, very helpful. And that's something that I've seen a lot of people do very well. Again, I don't do this very well, but companies like Amazon, right? I know we have all have mixed feelings about that, but there are certain things there they just do very well in terms of documentation of like certain things.
Just digging in there, is there things that we can do to kind of create that experimentational culture?
That's absolutely fair question, Jack, and it's hard, right? Again, coming from the development side of the world, we'll do certain things certain way, and if we're testing certain things, we see results. So like even if you're trying to use a different kind of API for something that you've used different product for in the past, you see the result right away. Like, this is not going to work for this reason, or hey, this is having some issues with other utilities within my code base, whatever that is, right? In marketing, it's different. So the mindset has to change, the culture has to be different. I'm going to try this, and it's going to take time. And that's okay. Telling yourself that, telling your team that it's okay, that this thing will take time. Marketing takes time. Building a brand, building trust in the ecosystem, these things take time. So in terms of experimentation, have a very good thought around what looks good and what looks bad. We can get lost into analysis paralysis. We have all the tools in the world to capture data, to capture clicks, to capture scrolls, we capture everything on our products these days. So don't get lost into analysis paralysis, because it's a lot of fun to, if you've implemented things like Mixpanel or Segment or GA for that matter, it's a lot of fun to just spend ton of time there and drive insights from it. But I would say, like, in the beginning, 80-20 rule works really, really well. 20% of your work will give you 80% of the insights. Your goal should be to get those 80% of the insights and move on. either the same experiment or the new one. So for an experiment, you have to be clear on what you're trying to do. What does good look like and what does bad look like? You need to define when will you stop doing this. But me saying that statement, right, I've assumed a lot of things. For example, if you're running an SEO experiment, right, if you're saying that, you know what, I'm going to write this 2000 word blog post about X, Y, or Z, ranking on Google with search engine optimization takes time. So let's say you have to have that knowledge. That's what I assumed. You have to have that knowledge that certain things take time. Your 301 redirects, no, they don't take time. But Google looking for something and ranking it, that takes time. Having that basic knowledge of what things take time and what doesn't is very helpful. I would say if you can, like in past, when I was an entrepreneur, I had a bunch of entrepreneurs or a bunch of founders. We had a group where we would talk about these random things to each other, because I ran like 3 experiments around products and mixed panel, and someone else did something else, and we'll learn from each other. If you have other developers that you can talk to about these things, it's very, very helpful, because I know, especially around like our Twitter community, right, there are tons of people who have done this. They've been doing it for some time. They'll at least help you. Hey, you know what, if you're doing this is going to take time, and it's okay. If you're trying to do something, let's say copy changes on your website, that's technically a marketing experiment, right? That will be dependent on how much traffic you get, how much net new traffic you get, because someone who visited your website day before yesterday is not going to show up today just because you changed the copy, right? That's not going to happen unless you're running retargeting ads, which I'm guessing you're not. So having that basic understanding is helpful in terms of experimentation, but really it's be comfortable cutting your losses and coming back to it in a year. Today you have domain authority of 20, and in a year your domain authority will be 57. Yeah, that same experiment might work later on. Having that cadence of, okay, I'm going to look at the backlog of my failed experiments and see what else can I kind of pick it up as things have changed. I've kind of gotten all over the place on this, Jack. Does this make sense?
It makes sense. I feel like one of the key points you're saying is not being afraid to do things that you don't have a lot of knowledge on and try them out just because they seem like a good idea, but also try to get at least a little bit of expertise thrown in there so that you're not, for instance, doing an SEO experiment over 24 hours and expecting to
Yeah,
see some results.
absolutely. You put it in a much better way than I did, man. Yeah, doing like 101s of basic concepts around marketing is very helpful. So, for example, brand marketing, it's very hard and it takes ton of times. So, you can read about it a little bit and you say, I'm not doing this. I'm not ready for this, right? SEO, you can read about it 4 to 8 hours and say, this is worth doing it because it gives me sustainable traffic or consistent traffic over a longer period of time. And you get to pick and choose that. Partnerships, that's another way of marketing if you think about it, like kind of partnering with other people who have bigger audience than yours because you have better tool or better cooler product, whatever. Figuring those pieces out, because marketing, you can do 100,000 things, and it's not a joke. You can actually do so many things, but you have to pick your own things depending upon your skill set, depending upon what you're trying to do.
I really like this. There is no specific playbook that's going to work for you. And your goal at the beginning is to just figure out what things could work for you. And there's not really any expert out there that can tell you what will work for you. You just have to keep trying different things.
Yes, 100%. If you can find other developer founders or marketers, if you're finding a decent one, they'll tell you that they don't know a lot, and they'll tell you that I don't know if this will work for you or not, because there's so many reasons for something to work and something to not work. It's mind-boggling, the things that we don't think about. Right now, I struggle with things like preconceived notions about a brand. Let's say you have used my product in the past, or you've seen the logo in the past. I don't know in what context have you seen it. Have you seen it on the open source projects, or have you seen it on a website which you hated? There are so many things, there are so many reasons behind why some things work and why some things don't. All I would say is work with someone who has done things and is comfortable saying I don't know. And because you also don't know, I think having a peer group is very, very helpful. I'm not talking about like hiring consultants or whatever, but having peer groups is super helpful.
One of the things you mentioned in there was about brand. Algolia has a very good brand. I use Algolia. It's great. I only hear good things about it. But when you're experimenting with different things, does that play into brand building as well?
It definitely does. And it's a very, very important piece of the puzzle, especially if you're trying to build a product for developers. For developers, that trust, that brand is that trust. Like Trust of what? Trust of the fact that they're not going away tomorrow. So the fact that the things will work the way that they say it works. Trust behind the fact that I'm not going to take and sell your data, right? Trust behind the fact that if I'm giving you a wrapper or a library, first of all, it will not break down. If it breaks down, I'm sitting behind it. There is support behind it. Trust is not just just one thing. Trust is a bunch of things around. Are they going to be around for 5 years? Because see,
Mm.
there are certain products that we take and then we put into our systems, and to rip them out is going to be a lot of work. So like trust around that, right? This brand comes into everything. And if I am not consistent, if we as a company are not consistent around saying, we stand behind this,
Mm.
then it's going to be very very hard for someone to say pick something and use. If you are, a lot of my guess is a lot of your listeners have been into companies where they were part of like B2B sales cycles on either side of the table. There used to be a saying, that's still saying, nobody gets fired for buying an IBM. That's an old saying, like a 90s thing. The point being, the IBM had such a strong brand that even if everything that you implemented failed, you're not going to get fired. So, so companies which were competing with them, that's what they were competing against, right? That's where brand comes into picture. It might not be very relevant to the developer utilities and developer tools, but it's important because someone who's going to buy your product, your tool, or bring it into the ecosystem of their own world is putting their own reputation on the line. I don't think anyone is going to get fired. Point being, they're still putting their reputation on the line. That's why trust is very, very important. Being honest, being you, and being honest about what you are and what you're not is very, very helpful because you don't have to remember a lot of things because you're just you. I know it's very, very easy to say this than doing it.
I love the way you kind of articulated, especially the point around being painful to rip out if they go broke or something bad happens. When we talk about experimentation, is it experimenting within constraints? How would you describe the kind of process? Because it sounds like you're doing that.
Experimentation at different stages of our products, of our brands, are different. A small curated newsletter site called Engineering Brew. The experiments that I do there are very simple, are very clean because of two reasons. One is I don't have a lot of time because I have a full time job as well. And second is I wanted to keep it simple and clean. Like when I started, I'm like, I do this a lot. Let me just start curating. And that's it. Like that's how it started. So that context is that I'm not trying to make money off of it or anything like that. So that's there. But if you're running an experiment on, let's say, Algolia, we use a proper product for an A/B test, for example, right? Now, A/B tests only work if you have a ton of traffic. Otherwise, it's never going to be statistically significant. That's a constraint. So when I used to run my own startup, I used to run A/B tests and they used to be useless because I had like 125 visitors on the website every day. Even after a month, I will not have a decent kind of data on what copy is working and what's not. Understanding that in terms of criteria, when you're thinking about your experimentation, be very clear about what you have and what you don't have. Being brutally honest there is helpful. For Engineering Brew, if you go there right now, the text box where the email supposed to be, it's automatically selected. It's a very small, tiny thing. Someone else did it. It was not my idea. I looked at it. I went to that website. Yeah, I'm gonna subscribe. And my cursor was just there. Like it's really nothing if you think about it. But that small thing, I saw my own behavior. I'm like, okay, and I implemented it here. To be brutally honest with you, I don't know how my site would react or this engineering group would react if it was not there because I did not run an experiment. I saw something. I'm like, that's cool. I'm gonna use it, and I used it. So sometimes you just see something like that's pretty cool. I think earlier when we were talking about, for example, Stripe documentation, if you see something in the world that is definitely like great and like someone else is doing it, don't feel bad about copying it, especially around marketing. Stripe documentation, if you're logged in, right, you don't have to copy paste your staging API keys. It's a small thing. Again, they did it, I think, 7, 8 years ago, something like that. It's been a while. You see something like this, use it. There's nothing wrong with that. And one might think that that's not a marketing tactic or a marketing thing, but in my opinion, that is, right? Because even right now, 90% of the API documentation don't do that. So people will remember you. That's trust. That's brand building. That's that one thing that people will like, that was cool, man. I'm going to remember that.
Natvar, we are very unfortunately out of time. That was very, very interesting. If people want to hear more, where can they find out stuff?
You can follow me at on Twitter, Natwar86, Natwar86. That's my Twitter handle. Uh, I work at Algolia. We are a search and discovery API company. Anytime that you see a website search, it's powered by something. A lot of times it's powered by Algolia. Super happy to be here. We do a lot of work with front end, back end, and we have a lot of utilities, a lot of things that are open source that are not and whatnot. Other than that, I run a small newsletter called Engineering Brew. You can find it at engineeringbrew.com, and it's of curated engineering blogs. I like to read and I'm just curating them as I'm reading them, and I send out a newsletter and whatnot around that.
Thanks for listening to Scaling DevTools. If you enjoyed this, we also have a newsletter on all things DevTools at bitreach.io. Please sign up, and we'll see you soon.